6:09 on the 27th of April, and this is the Finance Committee. And Ron, you don't need to tell me, I was already planning on letting Lauren go first.
I figured you were. I just didn't know where you were, if you were listening or not listening, but. So, Madam Chairman, if I could just kind of outline why I have Lauren here.
Sure.
So, Finance Committee members, one of the issues that has become very confusing even to me, because different town administrators, managers, different selectmen, different finance board members give me different concepts of exactly what you can do on the floor of town meeting with regard to the school budget. I've heard a lot of people tell me that you have to bring forward their proposed assessment. And then I've heard other people saying, no, you don't have to bring forward their assessment. You can amend it. You can do all kinds of things. So I've had discussions with the attorney, Copeland Page, with Lauren, who's on this call. And I wanted her to give you guys a clear understanding of what can and cannot be accomplished and brought forward as it relates to the school assessment. With that, Lauren, if you could kind of outline the options and what you've told me so that the Finance Committee has a good understanding of this.
Certainly. Thank you for having me. It's nice to kind of see all of you. And hopefully we'll see you at town meeting in person in a week or so. I can't remember exactly when it is. The first thing is that the provisions of Chapter 71, Section 34 provide that the town can only vote a bottom line budget for the school, right? Chapter 71, Section 34. And that section provides further that any lines that the town might want to vote concerning educational matters are simply looked at as recommendations. In that same statute, it says that the superintendent has the ability to talk directly to town meeting, even if they're not a resident. The question that Ron is bringing up is essentially whether the Finance Committee is required to move the budget at the number that the Regional School District Committee wants. And in my opinion, for all the years that I've been here, I have said, and that's since 2000, I've said, no, the Finance Committee is not required to move the number, or the main motion does not have to be the number that the school committee wants. One of the major amendments during the Education Reform Act was to remove from Chapter 71, Section 34, a requirement that towns fund regional school districts at the amount that they requested. So even if we voted a lower number, we would still have, they could sue us and we would have to pay them the higher number. So that provision of law was removed from the statute. It is commonly stated that as Ron indicated, there's a few different ways people say it, but that number, the school committee number, the school district number, has to be presented at town meeting. In other words, the voters have to know if the Finance Committee is going to be moving a number lower than what the school committee wants. The town meeting members have to know what the school committee or school district was actually asking for. This is done in different ways in different towns. In some towns, the superintendent is allowed to talk before any additional debate goes on. In some towns, the select board will include the budget for the regional school district, like any other budget, in the requested and recommended line format. And in others, it's included essentially as part of the backup for the budget materials. The Board of Selectmen, who's responsible for issuing the town meeting warrant, there's nothing that says that the select board has to include the number requested by the Finance Committee. Requested by the school committee. And so, in this article, in this warrant, we have not done that. It says pretty generally, we're going to fund a budget and we're going to fund a school budget. And it also refers to the contingent nature of several of the articles. So one way for the finance committee to act would be to appropriate the amount that it believes the town can afford, raise and appropriate from, available fund, raise and appropriate the sum of whatever from receipts and from available funds to run the town and the schools for fiscal 22, provided, however, that anything that shows in the column override will be deducted if the override fails. So you could fund a budget for the schools at the budget that's okay for you all to afford. And if you wanted to, you could include a portion of those funds that would be subject to the override, just like you're doing on the town side. Approving any number below what the committee asks for is a rejection of the regional school district budget. So in the case of an override, with any part of the budget being subject to an override, it's treated as a rejection until the override passes. And it has to be done by September 15th.
So Lauren, through you, Madam Chairwoman. Lauren, the question that, I think at least I'm a little bit puzzled about is the town could choose simply to vote down the school budget. And when I say that, I mean the section of the school budget that deals with operations that can be changed, because I think we all agree that debt service and minimum funding has to be voted to approve it, right? So in the article, as you saw the warrant, because you've reviewed the warrant, the operations budget is the one that we believe is subject to the override and the one that we could reduce. So my question goes to, does it make sense for us to put in any number at all, or just to encourage people to vote it down? Because if we put in, let's say, $200,000 less, and Paxton, it votes it down too, they could, in effect, go to Paxton and say, okay, we'll take out 100,000, make you happy, and Rutland gets stuck anyway, right? So I don't know if it makes sense to vote down the entire school amount or to put a number we believe in. I'm just not sure what the best way to deal with that is.
Yeah, so I would say that's more of kind of a policy decision, Ron, about how to balance what you expect from town meeting. If, like, I remember a time at Rutland town meeting when there was a school question, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but hundreds of parents showed up at the meeting when they normally don't show up like that. If that's going to be the case, then asking the voters to vote it down may not work. And then you're kind of locked into the full amount, as compared to if you make any part of it subject to the override, they can approve it with that part subject to the override. And so you're only locked into the amount that you've approved not subject to the override.
Except that if another town doesn't vote it down, we got to pay the whole thing regardless, right?
Well, yes, but if the override passes, then you have the additional money in the levy for that purpose. If the override fails, you'll have to adjust for that reason.
Which means another town meeting.
It seems to me like there's likely to be another town meeting no matter what in the fall. And I can't remember, I see Anita is on, I can't remember, but I think normally we do have two, sometimes more. Yes, I see a lot of nodding. So, it wouldn't shock me that we would need to balance the budget in the fall.
So I guess, again, guys, I let Laura on for you guys to ask any questions to her to make sure we have a clear understanding. Because as I said, I've got mixed messages from all kinds of people as to what we cannot do. So since this is, something you're gonna be presented, I wanted you guys to feel comfortable. You understand what the legal obligation is.
Yeah, I think I explained to you and through you, Madam Chair, that in my view, the town does not have to appropriate a penny at this upcoming town meeting for any of the regional school district agreements. If it does, those are viewed as a rejection of the budget. But you would have to come back to appropriate the minimum net school spending amount at some point, and you would have to pay unless 1/3 doesn't vote against the proposed budget. So if 2/3 of the communities vote yes, you're going to have to come up with the money no matter what. If that portion of the school budget is subject to an override, you have a chance to raise it, to raise the levy so that you can do all the things you want to do versus just some of them.
Any questions of anybody to Lauren?
Be in for a fight. No, it's pretty much how I understood it, honestly.
The one other comment that just so everybody understands, in talking to Lauren, you'll see that the articles on the warrant and the motions on the warrant, at least the pay path is going to, we have to fund them at the minimum. So that doesn't necessarily, it says it on the warrant that it's subject to the 2.5% override, but when we make the motion, we probably will not have the motion say that it's subject to the proposition 2.5 override. But the Wachusett School District and the town is going to be contingent upon the override. And then actually there's a couple of other articles that may be subject to the override as well.
Yeah, and that language that we have in the warrant, DOR has said for many years that including contingent language in the warrant is fine, but it's not necessary to make an appropriation contingent. And just because it says in the warrant that something will be contingent doesn't mean it has to be moved that way. So in any event, you guys did it in a really smart way because you added and further to determine whether said appropriation shall be contingent. So it doesn't automatically say it is or isn't. Just kind of puts it out there for voters to be aware of.
Okay.
And the one other thing too that you should be thinking about from a strategy point of view is if the school and the school budget and the municipal budget are both tied to the override, is it more likely that the override will pass? Remember that you have two or three purposes listed in the question itself. But if we go to town meeting and it's just the town side that's going to give up, funds if the override doesn't pass, are people more or less likely to vote for the override? So I think it's just worth thinking about in terms of a strategy for that as well.
Well, that's why we put all three items in, because it makes it more likely for the override to pass because all three groups are logged into that question. So it helps to pass the override in general.
Yep, absolutely.
Which was the discussion we had when we did the override question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, if nobody else has any questions, I want to let her go because I'm paying her to be here, but I did want to make her available to you. So is there any other questions before we let her go?
Yeah, I have a question. Did I understand if 4 of the other towns pass the budget and we pass a different number, we still pay the requested number?
That's correct. You have to have at least 2 towns vote no. And then my understanding is, Lauren, it goes to a 1/12 budget until they get 4 of the 5 towns to approve the budget. Is that accurate?
Accurate-ish. DESE can decide on what portion of the budget can be spent, not spent. But yeah, that's what it says in the statute. I think they're a little more flexible, but yes.
So maybe what they do is.
I sent you guys out, just to let you know, I sent you guys out the current status of the towns. And I sent you out that the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen in Holden, the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen in Rutland, and the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen in Paxton have all voted to unanimously not support the school assessment. So there's 3 towns in play. The other 2 towns, I think, frankly, are going to vote the assessments the way they are. But at least 3 of the 3 largest of the towns are all voting against the school assessment, which is, I think, a consistent message across the towns.
Well, it all depends on the people, though.
Yep, I agree, but at least it's a better start than we normally have. Holden's normally not even involved, so we're in much better shape, I think.
Are there town meetings before or after yours?
After ours,
Okay.
which is a good thing. If we can manage to vote it down, I think helps them in some ways to vote it down. But I think we have to work hard to make it work.
It doesn't,
You need two.
yeah, I know, but it doesn't matter who's first. If that's the way you want to play the game.
Doesn't matter which two, Darren, just 2 of the 5 have to vote no.
I understand that.
Madam Chairman, I ask a question? Lauren, this is Peter Crane.
Hi, Peter.
If Rutland votes down the budget, the school budget, and 4 other towns do approve the budget, then obviously that's the amount that the town has to pay. Rutland would still have to go back to another town meeting to appropriate funds for it correctly, right?
Correct.
Because the budget's different than what had been passed. I just want to be sure that I understand that. Thank you.
Yes, you do. You have to go back to town meeting. If you reject or you approve a lower number and the more than 2/3 approve, then you are on the hook for that amount and you have to go back to town meeting and appropriate it.
Well, again, Lauren, it depends upon the way it's drafted, right? So if they draft the full amount is approved subject to the override, then they wouldn't have to do that. And then they could put.
Right.
reduction in there. But if they say, if the override passes, the full amount's approved, then they wouldn't have to come back for another town meeting. But if they do it differently than that, they would. Correct?
Yeah, if the override, if any portion of that budget is subject to the override and the override fails, then the amount that was subject to the override would also fail. So it could be the whole budget, or it could just be a portion of the budget, the portion that you all feel like you can't pay. It's probably worth a sit down with those other town administrators, as you pointed out, Ron, and or with the chairs of the boards to talk about it. If it's agreed that, it'd be better just vote it down and, the school thinks, the town administrators think they can explain that to the voters and that would make sense, then, I think that that's a perfectly fine option. But you do run into that issue of whether then the people that actually attend town meeting will agree.
So just to be clear, I've met with the town administrators numerous times. And while they agree they're going to vote against the budget, they have not said, or I think came to a decision as to, what would be subject to an override or what amount that they would approve. I don't think they've come to that conclusion yet.
Yep.
So Ron, I just have a question relevant to what you had said about 2 towns voting it down, 1 town coming back later on and deciding that they have a benefit from the school committee of the schools and their numbers changed. All of the numbers changed, right?
Well, they would all change based upon the calculation of the regional school district, right? So if they cut, let's say they cut the regional school district by a total of $400,000 and that benefited Paxton by 75, they could go to agree to it. But if we're looking for a bigger cut, once Paxton agrees to it, it doesn't matter what we think anymore. It's a done deal and we have to pay whatever the amount that the school committee recalculated to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Something is better than at that point.
Well, again, we got to see what that amount is, but
Right.
I think the towns have to fight pretty hard. Once let's assume it goes down, there's going to be more discussion among the administrators and the manager to try to get as much as we can out of that vote and try to get them to lower it as much as possible.
Right. I think it's just good to bear in mind that they have the ability as a regional school district to come back even with the same amount if they want to. So they're not required to lower their budget or to provide any additional recalculation. They often do because they want it to pass, but they're not required to.
So they come back the second time, they get more teachers and supporters at the town meeting and they try to re-vote it again is what she's saying.
Yep. I
So
think it
that's
really,
right. It really is.
I think it really depends on who you expect to turn up for town meeting and whether you'd prefer to kind of cross your fingers that it may fail, in which case the other towns may reject the budget. And so that may be one way for it to fail, or you could approve it, but subject to the override, in which case it's treated as a failed vote until the override.
What makes this more complicated, Pete, is if the town does put in a number, it kind of throws off the whole override question because the override question is at 500 grand, right? So once you put in some different number than the school number, then it complicates the override because people are going to go, well, you cut the $200,000 of the school budget, that means you don't need the $500,000 override. And then the schools can go back with the exact same thing. So, putting in that number puts the town at some risk of helping to kill the override, because if people think now that because the school budget's lower, that the override should be lower, and you can't change the override because it's a ballot question.
Right?
So let's put in 500,000 then. Why
Right.
argue it?
Right, but if it's 500,000 and we put a number in the school budget that reduces the school budget by 200, and that vote passes at town meeting, does that then make people think that the override should be $200,000 less, right? But we already have the override in the ballot, so we can't change that override number. And then the schools, frankly, just because we voted down at 200 doesn't mean they're not going to come back and try to pass it again. So that's why, in some reason, I think, in some ways, I think not putting a number and just trying to vote it straight down is the better course of action. That's what I'm thinking, but that's kind of a decision that has to be made, how to approach it. But I think that makes it more complicated for citizens if there's a number involved.
So one of the things that a lot of towns do with overrides, and Ron, I think you and I had talked about this before, is that they won't say which lines are subject to the override or what amounts are subject to the override. Because then if the override fails, the whole thing fails. And so, people say, oh, well, we don't want to have no school budget. We want a budget. We don't want to have no town budget. We want a budget. But if the town does it like that and it fails, you'll have to come back and you'll have to have another town meeting before June 30th. Because you need to have a budget on the first day of June.
And even if we don't say the school budget is subject to the override, and the school budget gets voted down, they still have to come back with a lower number, no matter what. Even if it's not subject to the override, the question is trying to get the school budget voted down.
Could be $1. They don't have to come back with a big number, Ron.
Well, I know, but if they come back with a $50,000 cut, then we still need the full override essentially, right? The system here is, school agreement system is so screwed up, it just makes it very complicated.
I think the bottom line for the question of whether to make a portion of the school budget specifically subject or whether to leave it general, and same with the town side, is, do you think that will help to get it passed? If you do, then, you can do it generally. If you think it would be better to know which particular amounts are going to be deducted on both the town side and the school side, then at the very least, if the override fails, you still have everything else.
So the other avenue here is, let's assume that we don't make the school system subject to the override, any amount, we just assume it passes, whatever. That if the school budget was cut by, let's say, 200 grand, just because we approved the $500,000 override doesn't mean we have to spend the 500,000. We could then still reduce the budget by 200 grand and not have, even though people voted for a $500,000 override, only do a $300,000 override in taxes. Just because you vote for the 500 doesn't mean we have to move that forward if the amount's lower.
Right. You don't have to appropriate the full amount of the override, but what DOR does is that they look at the first dollar spent as the override dollar. So let's say hypothetically the school budget is $1 million. And right now you have that $500,000 override on the ballot, and that passes. So they look at the first dollar spent as the override dollar. So you don't need to appropriate any more money than you're willing to, but you are able to if you want to. And that same levy capacity sticks with you. So the next year, even if you don't spend it all in year one, it would still be there because they look at the dollar spent as the first dollars on the budget, the first dollars on the school budget.
Potentially, if we didn't use the full 500, we could potentially have a little bit of excess levy capacity in the next year.
Correct.
It's a good thing.
So Ron, through the chair, Madam Chairman.
Just go ahead.
So if this particular process requires us to be able to go back and forth. And we do have a change in the budget. Is there any, I mean, the idea here that there's a way that we can do this, and I appreciate Lauren's input here, is really good, but are we going to explain that to the folks at town meeting?
Explain, I mean, we could say that even if the $500,000 override is approved by voters, that if the school budget is reduced, that even though the override of 500 would be approved, we wouldn't use all of that override. If the schools were reduced by 200, it would be our intention only to use 300 of the override money. We could say that.
I'm concerned because I do have a lot of people that I talk to, and their reaction is, I really don't want to see the school budget go up the way it is. On the other hand, I don't want to pay more taxes.
Yeah, well, everybody wants more services for no extra money. That's the nature of government. Everybody wants something for nothing.
Right, but if they're voting with their pocketbook, and they're the ones that make that payment every quarter, every half year for the taxes,
Yeah.
it's just something out there that I think we need to be aware of.
Well,
I think
that's the downside of the override. It's the people who are going to vote no, people who think that they're already taxed enough, that they're on fixed incomes. Those are the kind of people that are going to vote no to the override. People that think the school system's spending too much. I mean, people that are against the spending of more money are going to be the people most likely to vote against the override. And that's pretty common sense. I think that is reality. Some people that are property rich and cash poor,
I do have conversations with folks, and they're convinced that they will vote against the school budget, and that will solve everything. So then they go into the meeting or the polling place on Monday or Tuesday, whenever it is, and their intentions are fully to vote down that override.
If they vote for the school budget and then they vote against the override, then the cuts that we're all talking about are going to be put in place because.
Well, and that's true, but I think what I'm saying is they're anticipating voting against the school budget. And then going in on Tuesday to say, okay, we're done, we can vote against the override.
You're not going to get a $500,000 reduction from the school budget though, so that ain't going to work, but I understand.
The whole point is that this information needs to be able to be in digestible pieces for the electorate.
Well, I agree. I think that's why the finance committee works so hard to get impact statements out there, is to start educating people about this process. Because it's very difficult to educate people about what we're doing,
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so before Lauren leaves, are we going to tie part of the school budget to an override?
I'm sorry, Karen, I can't hear you, please.
Excuse me?
I can't hear you. I don't know if it's a mask or just you're not.
Okie dokie, here we go. So are we gonna tie part of the school budget to the override? That's
That's
not
up to you.
currently how we have the budget set up.
Yep, I suggest we don't, but that's an option. So I don't think we tie the school budget to the override. I think we just vote the school budget down. We encourage people to vote it down. I think that's our best option. Once you put in a number, it's going to complicate everything,
I agree.
I agree as well. Do we need a motion?
No, I just
No,
wanted to make
it's
sure,
not that way anyway.
It's not written.
I just want to make sure we're not changing everything that we just
No.
spent.
No, I think we're still on the same path, Karen. I just wanted you to understand that, the options you had, because it was, I heard over and over again that you have to first present in form of a motion the school number and then amend it with the finance committee recommendation, whatever. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that's not the case. It doesn't have to be done that way.
Right.
As long as we let them know what the school number was.
Yeah,
You
the
can-
main motion can be less than what was requested. And it doesn't need to put the whole number out there first, but you could have like a fact sheet or something where you said, here's the school budget, here's what the finance committee recommends, then that's out there.
I suggest that the motion goes along the line that the motion is to reject the school budget in general, and that's the way, and we stick with that. That's what I would say.
That's what we have. That's what we already have. So.
And that's
we're
the
good.
system we're on right now, yeah?
Yeah, we're all good.
Okay. All
Okay,
right, Lauren, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us, and I know you're going to be at town meeting to answer any questions too, and appreciate your support in the questions I've been asking you, so thank you.
absolutely. Thanks, Ron, and thanks to everybody else. And thank you for having me, Madam Chair.
Not a problem.
Lauren, Karen wants to make sure you bring candy at the meeting.
Well, do you want me to bring candy? That's a real question.
Yes,
Dark chocolate.
In some towns, they've said they don't want any.
that's fine. The town doesn't get it. You can leave it with me. I'll eat it.
Well, what do
bring
you,
the
do you have a
candy. I'll
history
bring
of
the
bringing
candy.
candy?
I'll bring it. Yes, I do.
Oh,
You never
okay.
know Ron, you never know how long the night's gonna go, you know?
I
You gotta.
expect This could be a while. We are just going to,
This won't be a quick one.
we moved it to the high school.
Okay,
So it's in Massachusetts High School. I don't know if you got that update, but it has been moved to the high school.
I did see
Lauren.
that. Yes, thank you.
One question before we leave. If there's a motion to reconsider on the floor, is the moderator obligated to consider that question?
It depends is the answer. You see, you knew I was a lawyer for something, right? Something was gonna come up. The reason that it depends is it depends when it happens and how it happens and what the past practice is. I can't remember a motion for reconsideration at your town meeting. You guys?
It's okay. If you don't mind,
Immediately following.
Ed, we need to be more specific because I think I know your thought process. And if you don't mind, I'd like to be more specific with the question.
Sure.
So Lauren, what happens at town meetings often is that all the school committee supporters, they get in, they vote for the school budget and then they walk out.
That's right.
And they don't give a shit what happens to the town budgets and they leave.
Yes.
So someone could get up and make a motion to reconsider after all those people leave, and it could radically change the
Yes.
result of that vote.
Yep. So Randy's decision about whether it makes sense to allow it, it's kind of out there. A moderator is allowed under town meeting time to consider things like, has anything substantially changed? Is this an attempt to avoid, town meeting procedural wrangling? Is this just a second bite at the apple? So, if the moderator's inclined to allow any votes for reconsideration, then the moderator could allow it. If the moderator feels like there needs to be a substantial change in the information available to town meeting, then that's what he would rely on. And he would say, no, I don't think it's appropriate at this time.
Now, I just know that in order to reconsider the question, you have to be on the prevailing side. So you would have to be somebody who voted for the school budget to make that motion to reconsider.
And then the upside of doing that is if people say, no, we don't want to reconsider, which they would say if it happened right away, then the budget is locked.
The prevailing side of any motion can only reconsider a motion. Somebody who voted against the school budget can't make a motion to reconsider. It has to be somebody who voted for the school budget to make that motion.
As someone in this room that has had a motion to reconsider, I understand that. There may be a time and a place for it. I'm just not sure that.
Well, if we're voting electronically, how are you gonna know who voted for and against?
Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. I don't know.
He does have.
Yeah.
It would have been those tally machines. I'm not sure how you would know, but.
Yeah, he can look at that because it has your name and and the way you voted
Mhm.
on record. So they'll know that.
Okay,
And the comment in town meeting time is that a lion-hearted moderator will look the mover of reconsideration in the eye and say, were you on the prevailing side? And they can say, if they say no, then they can stop. The fact that there is a record is also a useful thing in terms of,
Just know that using that tool will be highly, highly controversial and cause a lot of anger if that tool is used in that way. Because essentially you're purposely stiffing the prevailing side, and that will go over like a ton of bricks, but it can be done.
It typically, once the school budget's been passed, they call it to reconsider before they all leave.
the very next,
That's usually
Thing
the
that
next
happens.
motion
Yeah,
right
to
after.
lock it in.
To lock
And
it in.
if that's the procedure that's usually used, then, either Randy has to kind of be able to articulate a different reason why he doesn't think that's appropriate, or he would allow it based on past practice. You have to
Okay,
be in
just-
line to make the motion, though.
Just
the
so you
school-
understand, that's why if you look at the order of articles on the warrant, that the town budget is before the school budget, so they have to listen to all of these reduction issues prior to being able to vote on the school budget. I purposely put the school budget after the town budget on the warrant.
Yep.
As long as Randy doesn't allow the changing of the order of the articles, they're gonna have to stay and watch the town budget before they get a chance
I
to
mean,
vote on it.
that's possible too, that someone makes a motion to change the order.
Yeah, Randy's got to refuse that somehow or try to stop that, but that's why I did it the way I did it, because I damn well expect them to listen to all the concerns we have on the town budget before they vote on the school budget.
Yeah, if we have to sit through the
Karen?
meeting, they have to sit through the meeting.
You can take my word for it, Karen. I made it that way on purpose, so.
I don't recall that happening. That's the problem.
Yeah, believe me, that warrant is written like that. I made very clear that I wanted to keep them in the room to hear the town side before they walk out on us. Both Bay Path and Wachusett is after the town budget discussion. Are we all set with Lauren?
I think so.
Yep,
Yeah, we're good. Thank you, Lauren.
thank you.
No, I got,
Thanks.
Karen, I got one quick question.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go
Yes.
ahead, Tommy.
When I was looking through the warrant over the last couple of days here, there's no motion or there's no article for the override, and it doesn't say anything about voting for the override in the posted warrant. Is
Right?
there supposed to be?
No.
No,
Nope.
not
We-
required. The article is, or the ballot question is on its own, but some of the articles are subject to approval of the ballot question. But there's no reason that the override has to be on the warrant itself.
The election warrant isn't the same as the town meeting warrant, or it is?
The only people who can put a election article on for the ballot is the Board of Selectmen. They're the only group that has the power to add something to the ballot.
Right, but I think the point that was being asked is, it doesn't say on the last page where it does say other things related to the election that, that the ballot question is also going to be considered.
Right.
I think that's easy enough to fix, because it's still more than 7 days prior to the date of the election, and that's when the election warrant has to be posted. Ron and I can talk after about the best way to address that.
So you're saying there has to be some notification on the warrant about the ballot question.
Well, you have to have the full text of the ballot question on the warrant for the election. I haven't seen this page, so I didn't realize that this was supposed to be the full election warrant. But if it is, we still have time, so I'm not concerned about.
Yeah, let's talk about that tomorrow. I'm not sure about that. We just got to make sure we work. Anita's on with us, so me, you and Anita can clear that up tomorrow to make sure it's correct.
Yeah, we can figure it out. Okay, I'm around
Okay.
After about 11 tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
You.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good night, Lauren.
Night.
So,
Okay. So let's get the minutes out of the way. And I don't have about half of my stuff at home. Oh, thank you. It's on my kitchen counter. I have the minutes from April 20th.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second,
Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, we'll take hearing now. We will take a roll call vote. Tommy,
Rashala, aye.
Pete,
O'Malley, aye.
I have to abstain.
Darren, you say abstain.
Abstain.
David,
Lucy, I.
Ted,
Purcell, I.
Narwhal, aye. Okay, so now April 22nd, 2021 minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from April 22nd.
O'Malley second.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Tommy,
Bouchard, aye.
Pete,
O'Malley, aye.
Darren,
Ross, abstain.
David,
Lucy, I.
Ted,
Purcell, I.
and Narwhal, aye. Okay. Okay, guys, so now we're on to the $500,000
Okay.
add backs.
All right.
All right. So tell me where you guys want to start.
So I guess, Madam Chairman, I'd like to explain the document I sent out to everybody because I think it's an option. But I got to be honest, I just got your budget and I haven't reviewed the budget you sent me tonight. But I'd like to explain the option that I gave to the Finance Committee so they understand the thought process that I sent to them. You should have all got a document from me this afternoon, late afternoon, describing the budget I sent you on the Thursday when I left and how we could balance that 500,000 and effectively improve the financial status of the town. So let me just briefly explain. When the budget I sent you before I left, you guys had asked me to do a budget with all the cuts that we had made together, what cuts that the Finance Committee voted on. I took those cuts and I put them into the budget. And I put those cuts that are not related to the override, like, the restructuring of debt, like the 300,000 the school committee already voted. I put those in regular cuts. And then I outlined all those cuts that were geared towards the $500,000 budget reduction, the override question. And if you saw the bottom line calculation of the cuts, unless I missed something, you voted for about $390,000 of cuts that you guys voted to make that were not that were really strictly towards the override question. And that 390 grand, quite frankly, is what I kind of knew. That's why I asked the Board of Selectmen for a vote of a $400,000 override, because that would have balanced very well and would have been all set. The Board of Selectmen thought it would be a better idea to make it a $500,000 override. So when we did our cuts, the $390,000 of cuts that you guys all voted for was less than the 500. So now we have to figure out, how do we get to the 500? So I talked to the Capital Improvement Committee, to Harry, and I talked to Dan and suggested that as of today, we have $0 for capital improvement. We didn't put anything in the budget because we didn't have any money. We are using $120,000 in free cash to balance the budget this year, because that's what we voted on, right? What I was proposing, instead of using that $120,000 to balance the budget, that we fund about $120,000 of capital items, specifically about 116 is what I sent you. That we use the free cash amount, subject to approval of the override. We use that $116,000 of free cash to do one-time capital purchases. And then the 500,000 is effectively balanced because you're taking that 120,000 out of revenue, you add the 120,000 out of revenue plus the 390, and that gives us the $500,000 to balance the budget. What that does over the long term, it does something I think really good. When we go to do a fiscal 2023 budget, we have a balanced budget to start with, and we used no free cash to balance the budget. So we start off in great position in fiscal year 23, not having used $1 of free cash to balance the budget. So we don't start in a hole like we did this year. So it improves the financial position.
Wait a minute, time out. I'm getting a little tired of you saying this every time. Go back to that. We had no choice but to do the $400,000.
I'm not saying you did.
Every time you bring it back and back and back. You're rubbing salt in the wound. I'm a little tired of every time I gotta hear about what we did in the mistakes in the past. You weren't here. You do not have intimate knowledge of what the Finance Committee was up against. Just like when you're in one of your meetings with all your department heads, you blame the finance committee for the faults that we have to cut the budget. If you want us to be a team, you gotta be a team player and jump on the same team that we're here. This is Darren, that's my opinion.
No, that's
But
fine.
you do it exactly, you pit us against yourself.
Darren,
In one of your meetings, did you or did you not blame the finance committee for some of the cuts? Because if you didn't, you've got department heads that are bold-faced liars. So what I want us to do, and I have faith in you as you're doing a good job, but you need to work with us. And
So-
when you say the finance committee does this, or the finance committee does that, or $400,000 and we weren't in a good spot, that's an untruth. And it benefits, the only person that benefits is you. And it's unfortunate at this time. So I just bet it. How's that?
no, Darren, that's fine, but frankly, I never said anything about the finance committee. I talked about the fact that we have $405,000 worth of free cash we used to balance this budget this year. You didn't hear me say a word about the finance committee. What I said to you that what that would do is put us in position in fiscal year 2023 of not having to use free cash to balance the budget. Listen, I know what you guys were up against. I don't have an objection to what you were up against. But the reality is that we used $405,000 in free cash. And we're trying to get to a point not to do that in the future, right? We all agree that we don't want to use that much money in free cash to balance the budget. So I never said a word in my comments a minute ago about the finance committee. Just the good thing about the proposal.
My comment was, in some of your meetings that you've had with your administrator in the town, you've mentioned the finance committee as kind of being the bad guy in this subject.
I mentioned that the $405,000 of using free cash and the deficit that we went into this year had a serious impact on the budget that we're proposing. And I think that's just a fact. I mean, if we didn't have the $405,000 deficit, we wouldn't be facing the challenges that we are right now. Didn't blame the finance committee, but the fact that we use free cash, I agree there was reasons why we did it, but that is in fact a problem in this year's budget that we're trying to overcome.
Okay.
Have you never heard me say the finance committee, was incompetent or did something bad? The reality is that we did what we did. It was done. I don't really care why it was done. I'm just trying to fix it for the future. Why it was done, I think it's old news, to be honest with you. But the reality is that we put ourselves in this situation to some degree because that's what we used, and that just doesn't make sense. So the question still is that in fiscal year 23, if we do this proposal, we will use $0 of free cash to balance to at the beginning of the year to start. So our fiscal position would be a lot better if we do this proposal. That's all I'm trying to point out.
I got to move on a little bit here. If we took the impact summary, we took all the numbers from the town administrator presented budget and the FinCom balanced budget, and we subtract all of those, I believe we come up with $406,710.25. Why wouldn't we just take that and then the remainder of the 90 could go to free cash?
I'm sorry,
That way
David.
all the cuts would go back.
I'm sorry, David, could you explain to me, you said you came up with 400 and some thousand, how much?
On the impact study summary sheet,
Yeah,
we have line items in there that says town administrator presented budget and then the FinCom balance budget. If we subtract those numbers all out and then add them all up for every department that has an impact, it comes up to $406,710.25.
okay.
If we
So my
gave
number was,
all those people the money back and used it, what is it, $87,000, put that into free cash, problem solved.
so the answer is you could do it that way. My number was 390 of the numbers that I got from you guys. My calculation came up to 390. We're 12 grand or whatever difference. I don't know what the reason for that little difference is. But clearly we could do it the way that your suggestion. And then we're using free cash to balance the rest of the budget to get us to the 500, right? No, that's not right, because we're already using the free cash to get
So this
to
is
the
just
410.
putting
We're already using the free
87,000
cash.
back towards the free cash. So you're going to be using what? 30 something.
Oh, you want to take money from the 500 and put it into free cash? So if you want to take some money from the 500 and put it
Some of
back in
this
free cash, is that what
savings,
you're
pay back the 406 and then take the balance and put it off towards the free cash.
What he's
I mean,
trying to say is
you could
use
do it that way as well, but you're asking the town to vote for that 90 grand just to put in the savings account, not to deal with any expenses. That's what you're asking.
Well,
I
it's
don't know
doing
if
the
they'd be
same
willing
thing.
to
They're
do
doing the
that.
same thing, Ron, that you're doing. It's just coming, saying it a different way. You're still gonna have free cash
No.
back after the override.
No, it's not. Here's why, David. Here's why
Ron,
it's
hold
not.
on, Ron, hold on one second. Your spreadsheet
Sure.
that you, the 390, if
Yep.
you look at most of the departments, they don't have totals. So that's the reason why you
Yeah,
got the three.
it gives the reductions that you guys gave me, and then it adds up the total reductions. That's all. It's not, I didn't total up each department. It's just a total. So David, to answer your question, what's different about it is right now, we're not funding any money for capital items. We have no capital budget, right? So we can't fix the roof on the wood building. We can't fix the heater at the library. So if we use the 120 grand of free cash, we can fix all those things. And then you just use that part of the 500 to make the budget balance. So that's the difference, is that it would allow us to do some repairs to town buildings. And we're saying, instead of putting it in a savings account,
I
essentially
understand
we're
that.
using the
I'm
money.
saying still gonna put money back in the free cash, Ron. I don't understand where you're confused on.
No, I wouldn't put money in free cash. It would spend the money you want to put back in free cash to fix items in the capital budget, which would be,
Ron, what he means,
Am I
Ron,
talking Chinese here?
hold on a second. Ron, what he means is instead of using the 120 in revenue, take out the difference from revenue, so the balance would be, the budget would be balanced.
Correct.
yeah, you could do it that way too. So you're right. That would be effectively the same in terms of the money. The only reason why I'm suggesting it in free cash is because free cash is a one-time revenue, where the new $500,000 is a continuous levy every year from now on. It's part of your levy base. So would you be using the one-time free cash money to balance one-time expenditures? That's the reason, David. Now I understand what you're saying. That's
Okay.
why you want to match up the one-time revenue to the one-time expenditure. That's why you use free cash. And then the money, the 500 grand, that 100 and some thousand, that now replaces the free cash in the general budget, that's going to be in the budget every year, because if the override passes. Does that make sense?
Somewhat.
I don't know where he gets the 390, but that's neither.
The 390, if you look at the form I sent you guys all on Thursday,
Got it.
and you look at the bottom of the line, I gave you in that thing, it's whatever the bottom line is, and I think it's column X, Karen. That's the total of all the cuts that you asked me to put in the budget. That's the 390. I couldn't come up with the 500 because we didn't make that many cuts to get us to the 500 number.
I come up with 442.
Yeah, we have there's a 390. I tried to give every cut you guys gave me on that Thursday night, and then what we agreed to. I think I might have missed one, but I think they're all the cuts that the finance committee asked me to put in. And if you look at that sheet I gave you, you can go down and you can match all the cuts to your impact sheet, and you'll see that it's very, very accurate. There could be one wrong. I thought I saw a salary that I didn't cut that I should have in one of the departments. But other than that, it should balance. Now, what that 390 doesn't show is the changes in the budgets within the line items, where you guys asked the department heads, and you said, you can change your budgets as long as it equals the same line. I didn't do any of those changes. That's not in my document.
We didn't change.
Okay, so
Did you find a 390 yet, Karen?
I know where you got your 390. I have more money on mine, and sorry, Ron, I'm going with mine because this is what we've been working with for a long time, and everyone's been looking at this. So we're gonna stick with this format because this is what we've been using.
Yeah, and I don't know what the difference is between, like I said, I think David said it was like 412 or something.
Well,
Yeah, I
mine's
think-
even different than hers, so.
Right, because not
Right.
everything is there.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know. And I saw you guys made a lot of changes to Joe's budget that were radically different.
What I sent you guys out. Did you guys all
Yes.
look at what I
Yeah.
sent you out?
Yeah.
So does anybody have anything different than what got sent out?
No, mine's the
No.
same concept as yours.
Okay.
Different totals,
Exactly.
that's
The
it.
numbers may be a little different, but the
Same concept.
same.
Okay.
Agreed.
So what do we want to do?
We
Is
want
that
to use.
Karen 1 or Karen 2? The
And then
first
you
one
could.
you gave me, the
Ron,
second one you gave me.
I don't think Ron saw it yet, right?
No,
Okay,
he has not, because you guys, this was our night to go through this.
Right.
This was not an official document until this evening.
right. So I think we should probably use that document. I think that's the way to do it, honestly.
Have you guys seen this document yet?
Ron, I'm sending it to you now.
Okay, so this is not the document you sent me just before the meeting. This is something else?
This is something else. I told you I couldn't send it to you because it had not gone through the budget, the
Meeting.
the meeting. Thank you. I'm really kind of a stickler for that.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, did all the finance committee members have that document prior to tonight?
No, they did not. We've just gone, we started
Last
going through a lot of the things that we had started to do, so.
There's a general idea of what it was going.
No, I just was wondering if everybody was agreeing to something that I was wondering if they seen it, that's all, but that's all right, whatever. I'm waiting for it to come in, Karen. Karen, could you just share that document so we can all kind of do it together or no?
No,
You know, we're not right. She's not running the meeting.
Oh,
and never mind that, I'm on my laptop and this is my Chromebook and so, because I can't work on a Chromebook with Excel the way I'm used to using it. So.
Okay, well, if you want, I mean, Peter can put it up for you if you just give it to him, but that's up to you. Just that way, then we could all see the document at the same time, you know?
All right, so I got down to a bottom number of 442.
That's the same number I had, Karen.
Okay, 442, 457.14. Which means,
457.14, exact same
Yep.
number.
which means in order to get to the 500, we would be taking away the use of free cash in the amount of 57,542.86
Correct.
to get to the 500.
And you vetted that.
Yes, I did.
So effectively, you're leaving that much money in free cash, that's all.
Correct.
We are going to remove the use of $57,000 in the revenue line that says free cash to balance the budget, and that's what's going to be there.
And I think that's important because no one knows what the heck is going to happen over this next year.
Right.
November could come around and we could get kicked in the butt again, just because revenue isn't what we thought it was.
Yeah, except in November, you'll get a new free cash number for next year or so.
But we want to try and avoid using as much of that as possible.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
the-
We just don't know how much it will be. That's all.
So is it, the intention is to not do any capital projects this year was what, I guess it would be the only difference.
I got a question about that right at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this Article 13, which
Yep.
is the capital improvement.
Yep.
And it says, I move to appropriate the sum of blank.
Yep.
And
The one I sent you had 116 grand, but right, the reason it was blank is because we had no money to fund it, so.
so last week, we've,
7,000 to do this. If we wanted to, if we decided if they, it was a time meeting. we could
But-
split.
last week, it says here that we voted to recommend favorable on
Well, favorable on 0 right now. I guess that was in
0,
theory,
but it,
because if we got more money, you would vote for it. But
it
right
also
now,
says it takes a 2/3 vote to pass it.
only if we were to borrow money.
Well, if it's contingent essentially on an override, that's borrowing, isn't it?
No, we're not borrowing any money. We're not, right now, we have no money to fund
Oh,
it.
all right, we're raising it. Okay, gotcha.
And the reason
That was why I suggested what I suggested, because
What I was getting at was, is it going to be really difficult to pass a 2/3? So why put any money in there anyway? Because we're probably not going to pass it.
nope, it's only 2/3 if we were to, let's say we were to borrow $1 million to buy a fire truck, then that
Yeah.
would be require a 2/3. But if we just put $100,000 to fix the roof on the Woods building, that would not require 2/3.
reason why we voted on that is because they can accept gifts, grants, and all of that kind of
Right.
thing. So that's the reason why, because we're giving them the ability to use.
To do whatever they can.
Right,
Yep,
whatever we can get.
gotcha.
You never
That,
know.
that sounds
Somebody
familiar.
might gift us $1 million and we want them select board to be able to use it.
Right,
My gifts are up.
come
I'm
on.
done gifted.
You're selling houses like crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we in agreement?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, let's take a vote.
You need a
Tommy?
motion first, or?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, make a motion.
I make a motion that we accept the document, the budget the way that we presented.
O'Malley second.
Okay? Any discussion? Any discussion?
I guess I'm just a little stumped. And I guess my question is, I'm just getting this budget now. The finance committee, I was just told, hasn't reviewed this budget yet.
We have been going through this.
Ron, we've been working for 8 weeks on this, 2 nights a week. We kind of know where the cuts were, and we know the process, the whole concept is where the cuts were made, we're putting back, what's left over, we're gonna use towards free cash.
Right.
Right,
It's not a secret.
not a big deal.
And
mean,
we got all this squared away on the first, on that Thursday we started, and then we went back to do more homework. So everyone's been looking at these numbers backwards, forwards, and sideways.
Okay.
Okay, so,
I had a question.
Okay.
I might have forgotten it, but give me a second, see if I can remember it.
Okay.
All right, so a couple of times the thought has occurred to me. Is it going to be a hard sell to the town meeting that the override is going to be replacing the free cash, essentially putting money back in the savings account? I think it's a good idea. And we really need to be able to explain that to people. One of the things that Tommy brought up that I thought was interesting was that the warrant itself doesn't include the override. And is it going to get to a point in the town meeting where that's gonna, every single line of it's going to be needing explanation? I guess it's a question, not a
Every
statement.
single line of the budget,
Of the override, essentially.
which is all the variances between what we can afford and can't afford.
Yeah.
So we're,
I mean, it's very easy and concrete to say we are putting back all the salaries that we cut or propose cutting from these departments. And that's easy and concrete. And then we're going to say, and we're also going to put back X number of dollars, which I think is about 60 something now, into free cash.
yeah, but we're not,
But could we, and to continue on with your thing, there's nothing that says at that point there, they could have a special town meeting. We can fix the wood roof repair, the new plows for the DPW, whatever we need to do, we can apply that money to it because it's free cash. We're just saying we're gonna have free cash to do it. And when we have our second town meeting, because we're not gonna get away with one, we can figure it out.
so,
So it's
It's just, I think it's planning for some of these things that we know we want to do.
so, and Ted, we're not putting money back in. We're just not taking as much out.
That's true.
Okay, yeah, all right. I think that we need to,
Say that.
yeah, that's a better way of looking at it. And then,
Which will give us the ability to do some of these other things.
Right,
and so on some levels,
potentially.
these are
Right.
what Ron's proposal had and the one that we're looking at right now are essentially accomplishing the same things, just slightly different way.
Because the numbers don't match. Our numbers and Ron's numbers are a little bit off. We can figure that out. But what
So-
basically, we don't spend the whole money and then we potentially have it to use for somewhere else.
So through Madam Chairman, so, in thinking about what you're saying here, Ed, is let's assume we leave $65,000 in free cash. We don't allocate any money in the capital budget for this annual town meeting, but when we get to the fall town meeting, we can use that, well, we frankly won't be able to use that 65 grand, but there will be a new free cash amount that is certified by the state that we will be able to use to do some of those capital items. But free cash,
The
I think.
65 will be part of it, correct?
No, I don't think so. I think that it certifies and you have to use it prior to the closing of the fiscal year. So that 65 grand in free cash will just get moved into next year's free cash or whatever. But you can't, they only give you a certain amount of time to spend the free cash. But there'll be a new free cash number that will be certified in, in time for us to vote for those capital items in the next budget year. So even though we lose the 65, we'll gain new money to do those capital items.
Well, the 65 just gets pushed down the road a little bit. It's not losing.
It gets moved into the
To the next
determination of the new free cash number for the next year.
Right.
They
I
wipe
think
out-
that's
I
recycling.
see Becky.
Can I comment?
Yes.
Yeah, if you leave 65 in free cash, it'll roll into next year. So it kind of gets a new, like if you don't spend it by June 30th, it goes into the next fiscal year. So it is in there because it'll sit there and unspent and then it'll get rolled into the big amount that's coming out in the fall. That
That's
gets
what I
certified.
think I was trying to explain. I'm not sure I did it so well, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
exactly
okay.
right.
Okay, thank you, Becky.
Yeah.
All right.
So we have a motion.
We have a motion and a second. So any other discussion?
We all look at you.
I'm simple. I need stuff explained to me very
Okay.
simply.
So Tommy,
Kushala, aye.
I got good brownie.
Pete, Pete,
O'Malley, aye.
Darren,
Ross, aye.
David,
Lucy or I?
Ted,
Purcell, aye.
and Norwald, aye. Okay, guys, there we go.
We're done?
I think we're done.
Just so you know, then Article 11, I think I sent you that motion, that thing. That's going to go back to 0 for the purposes of where we're at for the warrant for the annual town meeting, okay?
Okay.
So, any other questions? Any other discussion?
That's what I'm looking.
Yeah, there was that document that I had sent, put together as some slides,
Yes.
as some additional information to put out. Did anyone have a chance to further look at that? Is that something, should we go
Did you send
ahead?
it out with all the information in it?
Uh-huh.
I didn't see the slides.
I thought it was done well.
I know I saw the first ones, but
There were a lot of blanks in that one. The next one was filled out.
I.
Yeah, I did send out the completed one, correct?
Right.
And I missed it. I apologize.
Because I also then had done a little
I missed that. Sorry.
potential letter to the editor as well.
To the landmark?
Yeah, I
Editorial
think that would be the place to say what?
Your editorial PDF.
Yeah, is that, at
Yep.
the moment, I'm not even finding the email that I sent, but
You did. You sent it. I'm sorry, on Sunday. I'm sorry.
Hey, David, I apologize, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Did you send an email out to everybody about
Just
something?
to us. It was just to us. It was something that he's working on to potentially put another different way of putting the impact statements up for people to look at.
Karen, can we briefly talk about your thoughts as to, I think in our discussion today, the concept was a town meeting that we would put out the line item budget you guys just voted on a few minutes ago, and also attach some type of impact statement and hand it out to everybody that comes to town meeting so they could look up the cut in the department and then the impact statement. Is that the direction you're moving, Karen? That's sort of what you told me today, right?
Gentlemen, what do we think? That's my vision.
Yeah, no, that's, I
Why
think
would,
that,
yes.
yeah, absolutely.
I know in
think
the
that's-
past, that's what we've always done. So people will be expecting that we will have that there.
They want information.
So Karen, send me a copy, Dan, on the budget you guys just voted tonight. so that Dan can start working and getting it to be in proper form. And then, I don't know if you're gonna send the impact statement as it's drafted, or do you want to put that in like a Word format for a town meeting? I think you did it in Excel.
Yeah, but
Just
they
in the format you
give
did
it
it?
as a PDF and print it.
Yeah, just a PDF, just print it.
Just do it in the Excel format and print it the way it is?
I just
Yeah.
save it as a PDF and print it.
Okay, all right. So once we finalize this, I'll let my office staff make, I don't know how many copies you think we might need of both
Ask
of those.
Anita,
documents.
she
It's a lot of
knows.
print.
Anita knows, because she's been handling this for a lot of years. She can,
Did the summary that you put together get posted to the?
it did, it got posted on Monday.
It's
Okay.
posted on all the websites.
Should we do a display in the hall?
No.
Okay.
Well, me and you.
No, I totally agree with that.
We know what we're doing.
No one's, well, no one's gonna look at it.
No,
That's
they're
the
gonna
thing.
walk
In
by. They're
all
trying to get-
seriousness, Pete, I'd be more than happy to if I thought people were gonna look at it, but I don't think most people are gonna come in. First of all, it's a brand new location.
Right.
So people are gonna come in, they're gonna grab their stuff, they're gonna go sit down, and that's when they start looking at stuff.
Okay.
So I
agree.
think, although it might be, there might be a few that might look at it, it's my opinion that most people would walk right by it and it would be a lot of effort for nothing.
So you may want to have that option available. If somebody comes up to the microphone and says, here on page 14,
Mhm.
this is information, I'm not sure if I need to be able to walk through that. We could
Do
go
we
to
we
that.
still? Okay, yeah.
So if there's no objection, I can work with Karen on developing those documents for town meeting and we'll work with the Anita to find out how many. And we'll have those ready for town meeting. We'll make them in a way that it's easy for people to follow, okay?
Do we want to have Ted's slideshow, which it may need, maybe we want to adjust it a little here or there, but I think it's a great little thing.
I think that I truthfully, I think your slideshow needs to be uploaded to the town website
Or at least
and
in
Peter,
available that night if there's something that
right.
we need to put on the screen.
Peter Crane had also said that it might be something that once
Put on the
we
TV.
sort of put it down, that he could do something like that with it.
That would be wonderful.
Exactly. That's the same thing.
Because
So
I think, I don't know if Ron has seen this, but this is perfect. I mean, you did a great job.
Yeah, I agree.
You talking about the impact statement?
no,
We're
this
talking about a
is,
different version, Ted's version of like a PowerPoint presentation of it.
So that may be the document you want to attach with the budget you just voted tonight then, depending upon how nice it looks. The nicest you can make it, the easiest you can to make people understand it, the better off you're gonna be.
Yep.
Because people have a short attention span and they're gonna glance at shit more than study it. So the easier you can make it for them, the simpler, the better off you'll be.
Okay.
I think we have,
Do we need to do anything with that?
so has everyone had a chance to look at this?
I looked at it over the weekend, I think.
I looked at it.
Perfect. So
I
then,
do think I make one reference in there to an Article 10 that is now Article 9, so I made a note to.
Okay.
okay,
Okay.
Yeah, guys, understand that the warrant has been changed. So the motions document I sent you, the numbers are gonna be different because it's now, I had to make the motions document reflect what the warrant has. And I looked at all your recommendations for which articles you're gonna recommend from your minutes, and I updated, but please check to make sure that I did it right, because I did it based upon the minutes of the meeting, okay? I think I got what you did. I think there was only a couple that you didn't make recommendations, and most of those were the land use ones. And so, I think it's in pretty good shape, but just double check. Make sure I didn't make any mistakes with your recommendations, okay?
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I attached in there too was a draft letter to the editor. Is that something that we want to do? Someone had mentioned something about that when we last met.
So that,
Something that would come from all of us, me as an individual, or
well, it come from the chairperson, right? Wouldn't that be the,
we could also-
Some the finance committee in total is what, you could put Rutland Finance Committee in, or you could put the chairman, have it sign it, and then put on behalf of the Rutland Finance Committee, whatever way you want to do it. But the chair speaks for you guys. He just, in the letter, you could just say that at the very end of it, you know?
Yeah, I'm so used to all this electronic stuff. I put a couple of links in there that probably aren't going to be practical, but somehow steer people towards the information on the town website.
People are looking at it in the paper trying to press the button.
I put it on the, just so you know, I put it on the town website. I put it on my Facebook page, and I asked all the department heads to share it on their social media sites. So
And
that's
they
where it's
did.
at now. Now, if your budget, if this presentation of that you're talking about that David did is nicer, we can change out that document if you want and put in David's. If you guys think that David just.
I'm not taking, I don't want to steal the thunder. Ted did it, not David.
No, I'm sorry, Ted's document. If Ted, if Ted made it look nicer and stuff and you want to change out, if it says effectively the same thing as the document that was given to me to put on the web, I'm happy to have Anita swap that document and have the prettier one online.
But I think we just
Where
want to
we-
have this ready to go on the screen at Wachusett. if we need
No,
No, we
no,
want to do
no
one
screen,
that, no.
no screen. It's handouts.
We had talked about, I think, doing both, perhaps posting this as well,
Exactly. Post
and-
this on the town website.
and
post this on
also-
TV.
have it as a handout. So Ron, I need to make a few more edits to it. It's done in PowerPoint, which is on my computer at home. I don't want to pull it into the Chromebook here because it'll probably
So-
melt it.
so let
And
me- Yep.
I'll send it to you
Yep.
probably tomorrow.
Well, send me the note, and if you guys agree that we swap it out, we can swap it out. Now, some people who are already looking at it will see the older version, but it's.
I think we want to add two.
It's not a swap it
No,
out,
we-
Ron.
we wanna
It's
add to,
it's-
not swap
it's
out.
an
What's
additional,
another document, it's different?
Yeah,
and it's additional resource because the impact statements are from the point of view of the department heads. It's important that they be heard as well.
Right.
So yeah, send me what you got and I'll figure out what to do with it. The other thing, I want to make one real note that I made to my department heads, that while we can talk about the impact of the cuts, we cannot ask voters to vote one way or the other, just to be clear. We got to be careful we don't do that because that Anita made it very clear to me that that's against the town is not allowed to come out and say, vote for the override or don't vote for the override. We got to stay neutral. We can only present the facts of the impact of the vote on what the impact is on the departments, all right? Just want to be warned to be cautious of that because we can get ourselves into legal issues.
okay.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Any
I
discussion?
have a question.
Yes.
Is there a meeting on Thursday night?
No.
Better question. When is your next meeting?
Next Tuesday.
We'll let you know.
May 8th.
We'll let you know.
May 8th in Wachusett High School.
Well, should we tentatively plan for next Tuesday, just in case?
Why don't we do that? Why do we plan
Yeah,
on a week
just
from
once a
Tuesday?
week.
Just on
Yeah, if it has to
Tuesday.
happen, we'll do it.
Let's plan on Tuesday. I'll send out something to Tamika to post it so that we're all set for Tuesday. And
Just
then
if we don't need
hopefully we can cancel it.
Right, okay.
Okay.
So Ron's good, so to say.
Right, no, I agree with you. Okay?
Karen, let me ask you a question, just, I want to make sure I understand. So the warrant article that's posted for the budget, I think it's number 4, if I remember correctly, right?
Mhm.
What kind of changes do you need to make to that warrant article to make it work? You're gonna put in some kind of total of what you're asking subject to the override, right? So that dollar amount will be in there. But do you need to put anything else in that motion document? Or is it simply as the budget as described in the handout that we're giving at town meeting?
No, we have to, I think in the past, it's all been spelled out. So I'll have to, I would recommend that you ask Anita for how the motions were done in the past. And that's what we'll have to put together.
Yeah,
I don't-
change-
Anita, are you on? Anita?
I am.
Anita, the question I'm asking is, they just voted on effectively a line by line budget, which is 5 pages of stuff, or for whatever number of pages of it. In the motions, do they need, I don't think they need to put that whole document on there. They're gonna hand out the document at town meeting. How does the motion have to read? We put in the total dollar amount at the end of it as, subject to the override but I guess I'm looking for what the form of that question, that motion would look like.
You mean each individual motion should have the dollar amount for that motion?
Well, I guess,
For municipal government, Anita, usually the motion says so much in salaries, so much in expenses, that kind of stuff.
well, we can do the summary sheet of that.
Or,
which is-
right, or you could say
Department
as
of-
printed on the handout.
Well, the handout's gonna be the full line by line budget. I think Karen just described the summary sheet of each department is what would be in the motion document, not the handout, but the explanation is the handout, I think she's suggesting that should be on the floor.
I don't recall it being department by department. Usually it's salaries aggregate,
Exactly.
expenses aggregate. Okay.
But it's spelled out to total salaries, total expenses, that kind of stuff. Nita, do you have the motion document from last town meeting in the summer last year?
Yeah, I can send that to you. The only thing is last, well, it ended up being June. That was a little bit different than what we'd done in the past, but tomorrow I can send you samples of last year when we were trying to simplify things and then earlier motions.
That'd be great, because then that way we can make sure that it's done the way that the town's used to seeing it.
Maybe we have to look at that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you're gonna see, I looked at a bunch of those, Karen. I think you're gonna see like a summary sheet with the departments and stuff, and then not the full sheet we're talking about. But I think that's fine, because in effect, it's gonna be the same information, just summarized in the motion, but they'll have all the details on the floor. But we'll look at it and we'll send you the example so you can see.
So I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, Tommy,
You heard the second, and then what's this motion? To adjourn?
Yes.
adjourn.
Okay. But I have one question before. So we're not meeting Thursday, but we're meeting next Tuesday?
Yes.
That is correct.
Okay, Rochelle, aye.
Okay, Pete,
O'Malley, aye.
Darren,
Ross, aye.
David,
Lucier, aye.
Ted,
Purcell, aye.
and Narwhal, I. Okay, guys, thanks very much.